Excuse me, I'm not sure there's audio. I want to double check that. Not yet. I'll give you a thumbs up when I can hear you.
Looks like Al's on mute.
Yes, still on mute, Al.
There we go. Okay, it's my fault. Okay,
Perfect, perfect. All
thank you.
better.
All right. Okay, so this talk, first I said thanks for being here. I see some new faces. This talk really has three kind of parts to it, or three aspects to it. I kind of believe Agile has lost its way when it comes to common sense, and I'm going to talk about that a little more, especially coming from me. It's odd because I hate that term, and I'll explain why. I'll explain why I'm using it. The other one is, although this looks like it's about Amplio, it really isn't. Although it will describe some of Amplio, so that's part 2 and 3. It will describe some of Amplio, but Amplio was not designed, as far as I can tell. There's not been other, it's not really a framework. And I'm going to talk about it because Amplio is designed as a result, well, a long history, but the initial part was 10,000 conversations over about a 12-year period, maybe 11-year period I had when I went to conferences a lot about what was needed. So Amplio has grown into what was needed. An example of that is Amplio's current integration of coaching, both life coaching and workflow coaching. That happened as in the first year of Amplio's system when people kept telling me they needed to know how to convey things to people. So Amplio is a reflection of what's needed. It's not a statement of what's needed and then implementing it. And that's quite different than other things. So those of you who don't know me, I think everybody here does, but people may be watching this on a recording. I've been around the block a long time. I got into computers in 1970 when I started at university. I was actually reading about computers and AI in 69. Pat Winston had written a book from MIT lab, from the MIT. I was not at the original Snowbird, which was where the Agile Manifesto was created, but I was at the 10-year anniversary. I was asked, presumably because I had helped form Lean Kanban University, which I'm no longer affiliated with. I've been not done everything, but I've done SAFe, XP, design patterns, lean flow. I'm considered a thought leader in several areas. To me, a thought leader is just somebody who maybe presses a little harder. There's no authorities. I don't believe in gurus. I don't believe in authorities. I believe that the fact that we have so many in Agile is not a coincidence that we're kind of stuck. I've written several books, as you can see. I've technically background. I used to be one of these 10X programmers. I wasn't the only one I knew, so I'm not unique. I might have been one of the nicer ones, but some people would disagree with that. I knew some that were really hard to work with. But so I started technical. I moved into process when I found out that's the real issue. What I want to be clear about, I want to talk about the common sense of Agile. Let me talk about this because it's really what this is about. See, people talk about common sense. They usually mean something's good and somebody knows. Sense, good, common, most of the time people talk about common sense. It's not common at all. It's something that should be common. It should be sensible, but it isn't. I would say at some point Agile might have had common sense. We worked in small batches, get feedback, let the people doing the work figure out how to do the work, a lot of other things. And this actually worked well for the team. But times have changed. And, we talk about sometimes dog years, like one dog year is like 7 human years. Well, we should be talking about internet years where things move fast. Now we got AI years. Things are accelerating. And yet we haven't changed the basic fundamentals of a lot of what we do in Agile. Yeah, we have better tools. AI is great. I use AI every day, just about. We're actually integrating, my guy's still working on it, an API from the Amplio system to be able to do queries and education on demand for participants. I call it Amplio GPT. I've been educating Chat GPT, so it's got a different way of answering, but now we got to get the API working. We're pretty much where we are. And I'm going to suggest that these 6 things, having a common vision, running a diagnosis before suggesting a solution, discussing with your people a new approach before implementing it, educating your people to have the ability to implement it, having an expanding body of knowledge, and providing a support system, those all seem very reasonable to me. And yet almost nobody seems to do that. They don't even seem to have more than one of them, if even one of them. And I think this is where we're bogging down. That's what I want to talk about. What we have to recognize is we're not where we were 24 years ago. Manifestos are intended to be one-time permanent things. You know, the Magna Carta, was that over 1,000 years ago? It's still valid in a lot of ways. But the manifesto, as we wrote it, was not a permanent statement. It had a couple of permanent statements in it, but mostly it was a set of practices and guidance, which is quite different in that those practices and guidance don't work now, or they're insufficient to work because we're no longer at the team. The manifesto was designed for a team, and even then it was dated, in my opinion. I'm not going to go into it in depth. I just want you to know that this is maybe why we're having some problems. We're holding on to a weak foundation. Okay. Here is the key question. And I've asked this at times. It's funny I get the responses I get. Do you believe there's an underlying order in the chaos? Now, a lot of people do and a lot of people don't. I happen to be in the do. You know, I'm a disciple. I don't know, disciple's the wrong word, but I'm a student of Reinertsen, Guild, Goldratt, Alexander, and I'm just throwing my name in so you know I'm on their side. They're not on my side. I'm on their side. And I learned this from them. Actually, I learned it from Deming, now that I think about it, but I didn't know how to apply it in knowledge work until Reinertsen, Guild, and Goldratt. And Alexander, I learned from him how to apply patterns, which I use intensely, although I've come up with another way because patterns are getting bastardized now by a lot of people in Agile, where they ignore the in a context of what a pattern, but I'm not going to go into that today either. But there is an underlying order in the chaos. I know when you look at things, yes, it's complex, but only some of it is complex. There's a lot of what we know. And we could take what we know, and in taking what we know, we can find what we don't know. Yeah, some of it you have to find after the fact, some of it you find after you do things, but I believe you can move forward. Now, it's not a belief anymore. I've got a huge amount of evidence for this. And I didn't even really come up with this idea. I sensed it. And then I read Goldratt's The Choice. And he talks about inherent simplicity. If we dive deep enough, we'll find that there are very few elements at the base, the root causes, which through cause and effect connect everything. So when you believe this, and this is the foundation of actually the Amplio system, it's been the foundation of my work for, I don't know, at least 20 years now. I didn't have it explicitly understood until I read The Choice, but I knew it was there. And then I read The Choice and the light bulb went on. What we want is we don't see that. We don't say we see everything. He never says we see everything. He just says it's there. And if we look for it, we can discover what we didn't see, and we could use what we know to navigate complexity with very little waste without having to run a lot of experiments. Now, of course, there's risk here because we know there are things we don't see. So we have to do things. And again, this talk's not about that. By the way, everything I say this talk's not about, I have other videos on and things like that. But you basically get quick feedback. So when you make an error and you don't get a result because you have complex systems, or you did something that actually wasn't going to work because there was another relationship there, then a quick feedback enables you to see it. And if you develop your system properly, it enables you to correct it. See, one of the things that I find always interesting is when people talk about and try to justify the complexity approach that we can't see things well, they use examples like physical examples or societal examples or animals, which, by the way, animal examples of complexity and self-organizing is not a good example, because if you study how animals herd and things like that, especially schools of fish with dolphins, you find their strategy of not having a leader gets everybody killed or eaten in that case. Uh, but the point is, the software development has some aspects of those, but quite different. We can make changes. We can do things in software development that you can't do when like when the Titanic hit the iceberg, there was nothing they could do about it. If you detect you've got a problem in something in software and you've built it properly, you can fix it quickly. Unfortunately, most people don't develop it that way because Agile has taught us people can do what they want, even if it doesn't make any sense to do that. It's like a free for all. Wasn't intended. The manifesto didn't say that. But how did that happen? Again, another topic that relates to systems thinking and perhaps the manifesto. So I want to actually say what Amplio is. And it's a little different for me to talk about it because there's really nothing quite like it. I don't mean that it's better than that, and I don't mean that other people haven't done awesome work. I'm a big fan of like Wolfram Mueller with Blue Dolphin. I like Greg's, Agile too. There are a lot of things out there that are really good. Uh, but Amplio is a little different. I call it a transformation kata. But those of you who are not familiar with what a kata is, it got popularized by the book Toyota Kata by Mike Rother. And I'm not going to go into that here either, although I do have videos on it again. But a kata approach, and that's been usurped a little bit by the technical development group, and in a good way, but it sometimes loses its true nature. The idea of a kata is you look to see where somebody is, you see where you'd like them to go, as a coach. You see where they are, you see where they'd like to go, you see what the steps are it takes to get there, and then attending to the human nature of how people learn, you take them step by step by step. Now, Amplio has extended this idea dramatically. Actually, that's not quite accurate, but I use kata as a framework. In the 80s, I studied under Fernando Flores, who's back in Chile. He was a political prisoner for a few years in the U.S. Not a prisoner of the U.S., but in the U.S. to protect him from Chile dictator. He went back, but he taught us how to do this. I spent actually a couple of years learning how to learning how to read. And so I've learned this in the 80s. And then when Mike Rother wrote his book, I was like, oh my goodness, this is the closest thing to Fernando I've seen. And I use it as a way to talk about it because a lot of people have read his book, but it's a structured, repeatable discipline for guiding meaningful organizational change. Organization can be a team, can be an individual. It's kind of a broad term there. It integrates diagnosis, visioning, improving planning, education, and support in a continuous cycle. It helps you learn, basically. It's not prescriptive. Okay, it's designed and based on thousands of conversations. It evolves as we learn. It changes. I've been accused of being a serial adopter, and I had to chuckle. Yeah, that's called learning. When you find a way and you get passionate about it, and then you find a better way, okay, get passionate about it, but don't hold on to what you had. Okay, so let me show you what I think is a common sense. And this is, I know, a horrible graphic, but it'll make the point. Okay. It's based on the concept of jobs to be done. I'll be talking a little bit more about that. But what I've seen from a consultant's point of view, that there are a lot of things you need to do to get an organization to become effective. So what a jobs to be done is, it's looking at what are the different steps? What is progressing people toward a particular approach? And then how do you look at that? So, a common example could be if somebody comes in and they want a drill because, design thinking has used this example, but jobs to be done does it in a kind of similar way, I think an easier way. But you want a drill, well, he doesn't really want a drill. And you could say, oh, they want holes in the wall. Well, they don't even really want holes in the wall. They want to get pictures up on the wall. You know what? They may not even want pictures on the wall. They may just want to have the wall decorated. Maybe faux painting is better. So the thing is, jobs to be done doesn't look at the wants and needs. I'm not looking at what people say they want or need. I'm looking at what would improve their workflow. What would have things be successful? What are those jobs? Now, this is actually a very important insight, and this is not obvious. I'm going to spend a minute or two on it. I don't think I made a slide on this, so I got to talk about it. In around 24 years ago, Net Objectives, I was the CEO of Net Objectives for 20 years, 99. And we got into process work, started with XP, got into Scrum, eventually got into SAFe. And as we did a lot of consulting after a few years, it was around 2007, 2009, what we noticed was that if you took 10 companies, at least 8 of them would be doing about 80% the same. There was huge overlap. In fact, I'm not even sure it's not higher than that. The difference between the 9th and 10th company would be one would have an added thing. In other words, there was this core that everybody had to use pretty much. There were a couple exceptions. I remember one time we found an exception where the company was a financial company supporting traders, day traders, people who make stock trades. They buy and sell in the same day or sell and buy in the same day. And there they were just, everything was a one-off. That was the one exception I can remember seeing. Some additional companies, some companies had things like FDA regulation, uh, insurance regulation, things like that. But there was this core stuff that had to be happen. And what we did at Net Objectives is we created a list of competencies. We had about, I don't know, 40 of them. They were about the business, they were about the team, they were about the teams worked across the organization, they were about product management. We had them broken down in about 4 or 5 categories. Now we just called them, I think we called them competencies. I'm not sure what we called them. We had a scorecard for each of these, and I think we called them competencies. That's right, we called them competencies, and we had a way to assess it. The reason is because systems of people trying to build value have a certain common need. And that's basically how I look at what are the jobs to be done in the sense of the organization. So how do I have a system? What should a system do? Well, the first thing is you need a vision. And very often there is no vision part in this. In other words, why is the organization doing what they're doing? 2 parts of that vision. One, why is the organization doing what they're doing by being an organization? Not why are we doing this transformation? That's another vision. See, that's the target in a kata. Here's where we are. Here's where we want to go. That's a vision of where we want to go. But why do we want to go there? Because we have this bigger vision. I've gone into many, many companies where this has never been done. SAFE, people like to deride SAFE a lot, but I'll tell you, that was one thing we did in SAFE. I'm no longer affiliated with them. I kind of went way past it after a year or two. But that was one thing that was very cool about SAFE. We would have this big room plan, and the CEO or CIO or CTO or whoever was the right person to talk would talk to the group. And very often it was the very first time people got inspired by what their company was doing. I remember working at, it wasn't Fidelity, but it was a company like them where it was this big group. Oh, actually, I remember, I can actually say who it was because it's a public case study. It was Vanguard Group. Vanguard in Milwaukee. And I can't remember if it was the CEO or the CFO, but it was some C-level guy came out and he talked to this group of 250 people. And they had always just thought they were building financial software. They didn't realize they were building a financial foundation for thousands, if not millions of people. It was inspiring. That shifts people when you understand the why of your work. Yet you don't see this a lot. You see rather here, do this, and then we wonder why we have feature factories. Now, it seems commonsensical to me that before you put something in, you should create a diagnosis. See what you need. I don't know of anybody else who creates a diagnosis. I mean, I shouldn't say it that way. I know a lot of people who create diagnoses, a lot of consultants. What I mean is organized frameworks typically don't, rather they have an already existing approach. You've got to discuss it with the employees because otherwise they're not going to buy in. Plus, they have a lot to contribute. You got to educate them. This idea you can just throw them into a new thing is not a good idea. But you can't over-educate them because you can't over-educate people. In other words, if you throw too much to somebody, they're going to forget most of it. They're not going to know how to use it. I'm sorry. I'm just got a little reactivated myself. The idea that you have a minimum amount of stuff to do to learn, to me, is silly. You want an ever expanding body of knowledge, but with an easy way to get access to it. Being limited and making people figure things out. Look, devs don't want to figure out known processes. They want to solve their problems. And if there's an easy way to solve their problem, they want to do that. This idea that you can't help them because they'll weaken their ability to solve problems. No, look, believe me, devs are always going to have problems to solve. Give them the bigger problems to solve, not the ones everybody knows how to solve. That's one of the most non-common sense things I can think of. So that's kind of the approach. Okay, going to pause for questions if people have, and also let you look at that. You can see the flow in this. Oh, there's one more, the support system. People don't pick up anything new easily. Give them a template, give them structure, give them help. Include everything you can do with this. Have a learning mechanism, and then you repeat this going around. Okay. Okay, there's more than this, though, as part of this. Now, we're not an ADKAR. For those of you who don't know ADKAR, it's like awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. I just threw this in here. We're consistent with ADKAR. I'm not built off ADKAR, but when I was introduced to ADKAR, I said, oh yeah, this is great. You need to make awareness. I'm sorry, I know you can't really read that from this. I'll make it a little bigger when I post these, guys. But basically, people want to be aware of what you're doing. They want to create, you want to create a desire for what's going on. You need to give them knowledge. You need to give them ability, and you need to reinforce it. You can see how this is very consistent. This is very consistent. What are we aware, discuss? We create a desire in them to improve. Hey, we're not laying this on you. We're working with you. So that's the problem. When you just do it on your own, you're laying it on them. And then you need to recognize you're just starting. It's funny. Frameworks need to not give you a little bit of everything and then just give you a little bit more of everything and then give you even a little bit more of everything. That does create a lot of training business. What it needs to do is give you all you need to start and then expand it out and out and out. That's another part. That's why the education. And then finally, just to give you an example, I'm not going to go through all these, but I have found you need a better product management system than wants and needs. You need to have understanding of team workflow, organization, workflow, value stream management, lean management, being a consultant, how to do change management. These are all parts of Amplio because you need them all. You don't need them all at once. Well, you don't need them all. You need parts of them all because maybe you're Scrum based to start and expanding safe based to start or any other thing, or maybe you're building it on your own. Being agile, that's great, but it doesn't, what's the doing part? If you don't have the doing, if you don't know what to do, hey, I would bet a lot of money. Get a lumberjack, a guy who really knows how to fell trees, to chop trees. Put him against me, who doesn't know too much about it, although I know enough to bring him down safely. I'll beat him every time. If you give him a handsaw and you give me a power saw, every time. Is he a better lumberjack than me? Absolutely. Does he know what being a lumberjack is better than me? Absolutely. But give me a big enough tool. People diss tools. I don't know why. A good tool, a good way to solve the problem goes a long way. There's no need to reinvent. That to me just is a nonsensical thing. Okay, so here are the pieces. So I mentioned that part of this session here is a preview of this webinar series I've started, and I've got 6 more coming. So, hey, guess what? 6 blocks. These are the 6. It's about a vision, diagnose and plan, discuss with employees. I'm not doing a webinar on each one of those directly. I actually am kind of doing a webinar on a lot of these down here. But I wanted to put this together because this is kind of what we just went through. See, it isn't this vision diagnosis, that's what I have here. I wanted to show this process needs to be supported. What happens when you don't? I'm not saying these are sufficient, but I'm saying these are important. I'm actually saying these are necessary, but insufficient. But they're also missing. The vision might be there, but it's when you're team-centric, you're not creating an organization-wide vision. So let's look at this an interesting way. What if you don't have vision? You get chaos. Why? Because everybody's working on their own way. No, there's no common thread. If it doesn't have the vision, the values, the agreement, the axioms that you're building off of, it's not going to work. Focusing on customers alone is not going to work. It might even work against you. Every year I write a letter to Microsoft. I'm a big actually not a big Microsoft fan, but I use Microsoft a lot. So I've been a customer of Microsoft since whenever they came out. I bought a PC and it was 80, 81. Whenever it came out, I bought it. I remember 81 for sure. They still won't sell me furniture at a discount. I don't understand this. I know they get furniture at a discount and I know they're interested in their customers. So why won't they sell me furniture at a discount? That would be valuable to me. It's kind of silly, isn't it? I'm a customer. You have to pay attention to the whole thing, the vision of the organization blended with the vision of the customer. In fact, you got to look at all the stakeholders. You almost never hear the word stakeholder talked about when it comes to requirements. In fact, you hear users, which is a very narrow set. And what we talk and think about, we don't talk and think about what we see. We see what we talk and think about. Edgar Schein talks about this. So when we talk about users, we don't see stakeholders. Oh yeah, somebody will throw in, oh yeah, you should be looking at stakeholders. And why aren't we talking about them? Why don't we have our artifacts? So we got to go beyond that. Would you ever go to a doctor and you walk in and you write your prescription before you tell them what's going on? We do that in the Agile space. And then if you take the 2 aspirin and it still hurts, he just tells you took them wrong or the wrong time, or that was the wrong brand of aspirin, or you weren't being aspirin ready or something. Sorry, little quips are going to sneak in here. I can't help myself. Virtually every Agile approach is prescriptive in what to do. Some have leeway. Some deny they're prescriptive. Cross-functional teams that you have to have them, that's prescriptive. Having sprints, that's prescriptive. There are a lot of different ways to do value creation structures. Somebody wrote a whole book on it called Team Topologies. There are others. Dynamic reteaming. Running a diagnosis is not that hard. Now, I want to spend a minute on this. I'm not going to go deep in other areas, but this one seems to be so ignored, it's important. So one thing we have to recognize is we have this big problem in organizations. We're organized one way, but our workflow is another way. Small changes in one area is not going to do it. You have to have a big picture. So one of the things, we don't manage the value. We don't see the value because we're not talking about it. Now, this is a bit overwhelming, but I mentioned how in an organization, there are a certain number of things that are critical. Okay, the critical are the red ones. I mean, there are a few things. And this isn't the full list, but it's reasonably accurate. People have to focus on success, do strategy, product management, development workflow, have shared services and releases. Yeah, that's common. Under each one of those, I got a bunch of common capabilities. These are jobs to be done. By the way, how do you identify stakeholders for quickest valuable releases? These exist. Now, I put the whole thing up here, but you only really need to attend to those in red to start. But you need to know which order to do them in and which ones you really need to do. I'm not teaching that how to do that. We do have a method in the framework where I took that part here and we build this to show you this. This is a board we create. So you can now interactively work with a client and walk through this, and they could put stickies where they're doing it well or where they're not doing it well. I'm just giving you a taste that it can be done, and you end up with, here's what's working, what's not working. And now you have collaboratively worked with a client. What an idea. Instead of telling them this is what you need to do because the framework says so. I'm not saying do it this way. I'm saying do it some way. This is how I like doing it. This is how the Amplio Oasis, as we call them, people in my program, have kind of evolved over time. There's even another way to do this, another graphic that starts out a lot easier, but you get the idea. Diagnosis can be done. It doesn't take very long. Now, it used to take me hours to do this, but it doesn't take long now. And I used to actually do value stream analysis. If you can get a good value stream analysis going, you could do the diagnosis with that. I just don't have the ability, to get a contract to give me enough time to do that. This doesn't take very long. Okay, so let's go to the third one here. discuss with employees. I have done surveys, not huge ones, so I may be wrong. But I noticed this 20 years ago. Most people who decide what framework to do are not the people using it. This is not just SAFe, this is Scrum. SAFe just followed suit and did it on a bigger scale. I cannot tell you how many times I talked to people from about 2003 or 4 on till now that somebody says, oh, we want to go Agile, we want to improve, and we want to do Scrum. And I said, okay, well, can we talk about if you should do that or should do something different? Nope, got to do Scrum. That's what our manager said. Now, I remember in the early days, I tried talking them out of it. I was trying to show them how, look, this is better and this is why you'd want to do this or whatever. And then I realized that's a hopeless thing. Why? Their boss told them to do Scrum. Even if they saw there was a better way, then their ass is on the line, not their boss's ass. People don't have that kind of courage to go against their boss and take on all the responsibility. So we are imposing things. And I love this quote by Margaret Wheatley and Kellner Rogers. They have their own sense-making approach. I mean, there are about a dozen different ways. Sense-making is the idea of how you make sense of the universe or the world, I guess. And imposed change is the antithesis of Agile, yet most Agile is done by imposing it. That doesn't make sense to me. In practice, all systems do insist on exercising their own creativity. They never accept imposed solutions, predetermined designs, or well-articulated plans that have been generated somewhere else. Too often, we interpret their refusal as resistance. We say that people innately resist change. But the resistance we experience from others is not to change itself. It is to the particular process of change that believes in imposition rather than creation. It is a resistance of a living thing to being treated as a non-living thing. It is an assertion of the system's right to create. It is life insisting on its primary responsibility to create itself. Now, there's a quote that can go with this as well by Ellie Goldratt, also in the choice. A comfort zone has less to do with control and more to do with knowledge. I'm going to say that again. A comfort zone has less to do with control and more to do with knowledge. Now, I've used that in the past mostly in one way, which is people talk about managers trying to command and control. And I'm saying they're just doing that because they're going into their comfort zone because they don't know what to do. But there's another way he means it, which is I will stay in my comfort zone of where I know what I'm doing. That's almost the definition of a comfort zone. Where are you comfortable? What do you know? So when we don't have this bigger view of what's possible, we're locking people in. When we have this view of I've been told to do this, well, I'll either acquiesce or I'll resist. Or I'll do them both in a way where I'll pretend I'm going along, but I'm not a passive aggressive. We wonder why there's passive aggressive. People aren't brave enough, or maybe they're smart enough to not do what the manager says, but they're not going to go along with it. That's where passive aggressiveness comes from. Well, I don't like this. I'm going to resist it, but I'm going to resist it in my own way, and I'm not going to tell you. And then when it fails, I'll just say, well, that system didn't work well for me. It's the manager's fault. This is an endless loop. Now, I'm not speculating here. I hope you realize that. In fact, I'm going to pause for a minute to get that down. This is not speculation. I'm explaining what I've seen for over 20 years. Have y'all seen this too? You get what I'm saying? This is a common thread. And then we wonder why it's happening. Well, it's right here why it's happening. Any questions or qualms, as we call it, not quite feeling right? Or you get the sense. This has got us mired. Okay, jobs to be done. So requirements are hard to pin down. I agree with this, but wants and needs isn't the way to do it. And yeah, I know Agile tells us welcome changing requirements, even late in development. I agree with this. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Could be stakeholders, but close enough. But that doesn't mean you want them to change. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to not have them change without wasting a lot of time trying to figure it out. Just realized I had a really good picture, but I didn't put it here. It shows a pharaoh looking at, actually, I'll mention the one that I don't have a picture of. I saw in the real world cartoon. It shows this picture looking out in the distance, and there's this huge cube made of bricks, like the size of a pyramid, but it's cube shaped, not pyramid shaped. Not, and he looks at his foreman and said, did I say cube? I meant pyramid. Now, what's funny about that is it's nonsensical, of course, but if you ever looked, he'd see it was wrong, but we don't see what's wrong. Wants and needs are misunderstood. This is where jobs to be done. We know wants and needs are hard and they don't work. In the Jobs to be Done by Anthony Ulrich, he talks about this. He lays out exactly why it doesn't work. So why do we keep trying it? Well, again, human nature. Jobs to be Done is a framework for understanding what someone is trying to accomplish in a given context, what job they're hiring a product, service, or action to do. It focuses on the progress they seek, not just their stated needs or preferences. By identifying these jobs, we design solutions that align with real goals, not just for surface level requests. I recommend reading both of these because they both are about jobs to be done. They both came out the same month, by the way, October 2016. They both were working on it. The kind of agreement is Ulrich came up with the idea, but then there's a disagreement as who's gone better with it. The thing I liked about competing against luck, I'm sorry, one more thing about jobs to be done. About half the book is about this idea of finding out what jobs are. And then he goes into strategy and marketing, which is good, but not, it's good. There's a lot of good strategy marketing books. Competing against luck, Christensen is talking about when you just go for wants and needs, that's luck. So you want to compete against luck. You want to do something that's not luck. You want to do something that's driven. And he takes the jobs to be done much further, and I think a much more useful way. And he talks about, I'll give this interesting example. He talks about what's the job of a milkshake. This is where he's starting to get the idea of this. His company was brought into a company to do some marketing to sell more milkshakes for some company, don't know who it was. And so they did some studies and they observed who bought the milkshakes. And he noticed that a lot of people were kind of more professional looking people buying milkshakes. And he wondered why. So they did some interviews with them and they found out that people, this in the morning, so they found out that people who were buying milkshakes in the morning had long commutes and wanted something that was satisfying, occupying them as well, and easy to drive without making a mess. The milkshake wasn't what they wanted. What they wanted was something that tasted good, kept them occupied. It's interesting. It tastes here, it tastes there, kept them full and was safe to drive and safe to not mess up your clothes. That was the job to be done in the milkshake. Now, is that why people buy milkshakes? No, that was a job that milkshakes did. They also found out that there was a value of the job to be done as an adult dad taking his kid to get a milkshake. That was an afternoon job to be done that milkshakes did. When they were armed with that knowledge, they did all sorts of interesting things. They made a milkshake drive-through because it was the commuters who were buying it. Nobody asked for a milkshake drive-through. So jobs to be done, all these complaints we hear about customers don't know what they want. I used to joke about it. When do customers know what they want? After I show them what they don't want. It's gotten to be so common we think it's the way it is, but it isn't. There's been something out for a decade almost. Actually, I learned this also from Fernando Flores in the 80s. What got me interested in the jobs to be done and really challenging this, I remembered when I built software myself, and I did it for like a dozen different vertical applications in the 80s. I never had this experience I see now. And what did I do? I didn't call it jobs to be done, but I would analyze the value stream. I'd look at their work. I'd look at what they were trying to accomplish. I wouldn't worry about their problems. See, because when you have problems, you come up with solutions instead of looking to see what are they really trying to accomplish. That's what a job to be done is. So we have this knowledge base that pervades the entire Agile space that has us do exactly the wrong thing. And then somebody comes out, and I like, you know, in design and design thinking and all that, but it's kind of hard to learn. Jobs to be done is simple to learn. It's almost just, it's more than a perspective shift, but it's not much. But it's not common. Now, some people are starting to get interested in it. But again, as what happens with all new ideas when they go through gurus, is the gurus misinterpret it or limit it. I'm seeing now people are talking about job stories. Yeah, job stories are a small piece of jobs to be done, but it isn't the big idea. It will not shift. Job stories versus user stories. Oh my God. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater by comparing you know, it's like deciding on a car based on what the gas cap looks like. I mean, it's ridiculous, but that's where we are. Okay, and it's expansive body of knowledge. I've said this already. There's no need for people to reinvent the wheel. Believe me, there are plenty of other wheels that nobody's invented that people need. This idea that you can't help them too much is ridiculous. Don't help them by telling them, because that doesn't work. Help them by coaching and guiding them, improve their thought process. That's really what Amplio Learning Journey is about. How do you improve your thought process? Yeah, I'm giving a lot of good stuff, and I'm telling a lot of people how to do things, but what I'm really trying to do is get them to think. This is more and more and more important now with AI coming along. Because AI is basically just going to give you an amalgamation of everything that's out there. It's going to make everything a commodity. It's going to make information less useful, or excuse me, not less useful, very useful, less valuable for anybody who holds it. Why? Because you can just go on there and ask it, and it'll give you the information. It can generate tests. In fact, part of my certification is having it generate tests. So just knowing stuff isn't the answer. It's not going to differentiate you. If you're worried about your job, you should be. You got to look at what makes you rise above a commodity level, and continuously learning new techniques and how to put them together is really, really, really important. And then a support system. I mentioned this. That you can't just throw people to the wolves without a checklist. Even experts need a checklist. I don't know why they're so dissed. The idea of templates, of checklists, came out as a result of a Boeing, I think it was a B-17 bomber in World War II before it was approved. So they were, I think it was a Lockheed and a Boeing bomber were in contention. And the Boeing bomber had it all. It had it all on paper. It looked great. It just better armament, you know, better range. Everything was good. And they thought this was just going to be a walkthrough, and then we'll give the contract to Boeing. Except the problem is, on takeoff of the plane, it crashed and everybody was killed. It's not a good thing to do when you're trying to show your bombers the best. Now, they awarded the contract. I think it was Lockheed, might have been somebody else. Somebody had the sense to say, okay, there's a flaw, but this is a really good bomber. Let's keep a little bit of funding to see what the hell happened. And what happened is they had forgotten to unlock one of the flaps. So when it took in the air, they had no control because it couldn't move the flap, which is how you control the plane. So what did they come up with? Now, these were the best pilots, by the way. You don't put your major military test flight under somebody who just got out of flight school. You put your best test pilot. And the best test pilot and the best co-pilot made this mistake. People are prone to mistake. So they came out with a checklist. They still use it today. A lot of accidents happen when they don't follow the checklist, but that doesn't mean all you do is follow a checklist. See, I don't know, where people are crazy sometimes. If you have a checklist that could be useful, it doesn't mean follow the checklist. In fact, there's a great book called The Template Manifesto, and he talks about a very interesting study. They did a lot of good stuff in hospitals. So he talks a lot about checklists and templates and why it's so good, but there was something that was really, really interesting. They were studying different hospitals. And one hospital, if you looked at the number of board members, board certified, you know, all that, you look at the credentials, man, this hospital was like right up there. And then they looked at this other hospital that was just kind of average in terms of credentials. Yet this one way outperformed that one when it came to patient survivability. Well, that's kind of interesting. Why don't the best doctors get the best results? What were these guys doing? Isn't that a good question? I think it was a really good question. So they looked, what were these guys doing? Well, these guys knew they weren't the best. I mean, they were good. I mean, they didn't, they had good doctors. But see, the way patients die is not just something goes wrong and they died. Something goes wrong, yes, and then you're not prepared to fix it. So this really good hospital had the best doctors. They felt, well, look, something goes wrong, we're smart, we'll know how to fix it. These guys said, why don't we prepare for when something goes wrong and have checklists to do things when something goes wrong? So in the crisis, when a patient's life is on the line and you're maybe not totally clear about what to do, you have something to look at. Common sense, not done. Oh, because we don't want them to follow the checklist. No, you're not following the checklist. It just reminds you of stuff. This overreaction is pervasive, and I don't know why. It happens every day to me in posts and stuff. Somebody wrote a post how Scrum Masters should be calm, quiet, not get involved in a daily Scrum. And I said, no, I think they should, if they know how to coach, they should be there asking good questions and helping solve some of the problems. And the response was they should not run the Scrum, the daily Scrum. And I said, where did I say they were going to do the daily Scrum? I didn't say that. I just said if they see something wrong, they should help. This somebody says one thing and somebody goes to the opposite is like, just doesn't make sense to me. Now this is bad. So this, I put this all together. By the way, this is inspired by this book I read a long time ago. You need all these. You get effective, you get chaos. If you're missing vision, I wasn't saying these, but I should have. I talked about it. It's not fit for purpose without a diagnostic. You get resistance, requirements change. You get to have reinventing the wheel, slow learning. I didn't call it out in the picture, but I talked about every one of these. These look kind of common, don't they? Maybe the problem isn't that it's inherently chaos or it's hard to be fit for purpose. Maybe it's because we're missing these things. I'm not going to do this, but I did post something on the Penta. It's a part of the Amplio system too. It's something Tom Gilb and I came up with. Toyota proved the iron triangle is not inherent constraint. They proved it. They demonstrated it. How long ago? More than half a century ago. In the 60s and 70s, they demonstrated this. It was so unheard of to do that the people in the American manufacturers claim, well, they're just undercutting price. They can't possibly lower costs like this. They can't possibly build better cars in less time at higher quality with more features. It's not possible. Yes, it was. It took about 20 years to recognize it. So that inspired me to talk to Tom about this one time. And we said, okay, well, how do you do this in knowledge work? And we came up with the Penta, looking at scope, values, efficiency, resources, and design, and how they work together. We call this value by design. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just saying there's some other things. Okay. So I'm going to give you my 60-second sales pitch, and then we're open for questions for the next 10 minutes, which for me, the first time I'm doing a talk and actually having thrown in a couple of barbs at times, that's pretty good. So what I'm doing is I didn't have a slide on it here, but there's another big thing that I should actually have put in here. Part of the support system, I suppose. I believe that training is overpriced by a factor of 10. Training should be about 10% what it is right now. That's my belief. I don't mean training when somebody goes into a client and does an on-site client. Man, that's expensive. You got one person for a few days working with you. Yeah, that costs money. I'm talking about the public. See, we're using old school technology to teach. New school technology involves little bits every week, little bits so you can go to your work without losing time. So you can try something in your workflow and you come back and get live sessions to get Q&A. So a blend of live sessions, live Q&A, and self-study, because you are busy. Hopefully have a job. You can't go and lose a day or two. Although I admit, I did a survey once why people liked going to courses. Well, because for 2 days, they don't have to do anything. I just sit in the classroom. But if you're a manager, you want your people to learn, and you want them to learn without losing time from their job, and you want it to learn effectively. So there's this learning program I have. This is really, a lot of people don't come to this because they think, oh, I don't have time for that. Oh my God. Yeah, I remember this restaurant. I walked in this restaurant and it was this huge buffet and I said, I can't eat all that food. And I left. You don't have to do everything in the class. There are recordings, there are class sessions, there's Q&A. Take what you want. Now, some people, and some of you are here, I love that you come to virtually every session. It's enlivening for me, but you don't have to. It's not designed for that. I've got a somewhat, it's more of a self-study, a Scrum to Amplio team, but this is the big one. If you're interested in jobs to be done, or if you have a group that would be interested, I'm happy to do a talk in front of them. Look at the pricing. You know, this is $588 annually. This is like, I don't know. It's possible because I'm doing it. Okay, so questions. We got 10 minutes. Or objections. I actually would really like objections if you have them. Don't make them up, but if you have them, happy to talk about it.
So what are we to take from this? I mean, take your classes, but is there another system lesson here?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. What you're first thing you're supposed to take is what we're stuck in is not what we have to be stuck in. That's the biggest lesson. Because if you see there's a possibility, then you could do something about it. And if you feel there isn't the possibility, then what can you do? So let's go back. Let's go back and look at what I talked about here. Again, I would suggest, or let's go back here. I would suggest the biggest impact. What's the role you're in? So I can talk to that.
Agile coach.
Agile coach. Okay. So the key thing you want to learn is how to truly coach to make a difference, how to ask questions well. Okay. And yeah, actually, I think I integrate coaching. I'm going to tell you how I do it, but I'm going to give you some other places. Okay. You should read Mike Rother's Toyota Kata. Toyota Kata by Mike Rother. Okay. I actually have a self-study program where I do Scrum, and this has got embedded in it coaching. This is you join, it's not open for enrollment for another couple of weeks, but then you work at your own pace. Or you do the entire ACE because then you learn all the domain knowledge. You learn all these pieces. This ACE program covers everything. It covers, you know, all that knowledge I was talking about and how a coach does it. See, this is the other thing to recognize. I want you to notice something. I may not have been obvious. Do you see how this whole thing here is kind of from the coach's, consultant's perspective as well? Does somebody want to, some of you are in the program. Some of you want to talk about what you think she should do. I mean, she could read a book. She could join just the coaching Scrum part or do the whole thing. Anybody want to say a few words on that?
It might be best to start with the Scrum. Well, what do you coach Scrum or do you coach other Agile approaches?
I'm very fond of Kanban, but most people are Scrum, so I add Kanban to Scrum for a living.
Well, certainly, I think the whole ACE program would be beneficial to you because it does focus on flow and lean as well as what's been discussed here. I think one of the big takeaways that may not have been obvious in this section is that one of the best things you can do with coaching is to encourage people to exercise their individual agency to see how things can be done better and to work together to do that. And I don't see a lot of people taking that approach. And I have seen in my own work that people who are considered sort of average or marginal can do excellent work if they get the idea that they can actually make a difference. And if you build an environment where they can do that.
Yeah.
I see Scrum and Safe in here, but I didn't see Kanban. That's interesting.
Kanban doesn't need quite as much help, but I could have put it up there and I'll add it. Okay.
Got it.
So remember, I actually formed Lane Kanban University with Dave Anderson back in.
I was at the first conference in Miami.
Oh, wonderful.
Where
Yes.
you were speaking.
Right. That's right. So, Kanban, I think, has lost its way a little bit, but yes, I should put it up there. But see, the thing is, the advantage talking a little bit also is we're based very much on the principles underneath it all, that the principles that Kanban is based on as well, that are somewhat not as done. So what Susan we said is we do talk about this. What should coaches do? How should they be in terms of taking agency? But you also need to, and I think that's actually a big thing. But you also need to know how can a Scrum team get better, like you say, if that's where you are, by teaching Kanban. The problem is Kanban practices, as you know, put them into Scrum. You don't have Kanban, you've got a better Scrum. But Kanban is not that. Yeah.
So
I'll write
while
up
I'm
something on this. I can see that I should probably make self-study without necessarily the ACE program. But again, if you just had a couple hours a week, it's $49 a month. I suggest you take the dive in. You'll learn a lot. Are there other questions? I'm happy to keep going with you, Tomo, but I want to know if anybody else has a question, then we'll come back if you want more time.
I don't have a question, but since you asked for qualms, I had put one in the
Oh.
chat
Oh,
around
I didn't see it. Let me check.
the
Good.
inherent simplicity. And while I generally broadly agree with the notion that it's good if you understand sort of the basic drivers and rules,
Right.
that alone is not always a guarantee for being able to kind of predict and forecast what the
Oh.
system is going to do.
Absolutely. I thought I mentioned that, but that's correct. That's not a qualm, that's accurate. In other words, the joke with qualms is we talk a lot, and if I inject some idea in the university, then we discuss it. It's not like anything I say is true. It gets challenged, and people, we don't move on until people understand it. But then sometimes people say, well, I mostly understand, but I have some qualms. So Susan got the idea, we say, keep calm and carry on. So that's just an inside joke, basically. But no, so I agree. I agree with you completely on this. So, and I mentioned it, but maybe I don't make it clear enough. Oh no, that was early on. See, inherent simplicity, he says these exist. He doesn't say they are visible. He
Well,
doesn't, you see
that's
them
not
all.
so much what I'm having a qualm about. It's not whether we can see it when it's there. It's that even when we know they're there and when we can see them, that also is not good enough for us to be able to predict what the system is going to do.
That is
So
correct.
yeah.
I didn't mean to say it wasn't correct, but what we can do then, so we can predict a lot, but not completely. So what we have to do is recognize we don't have to run experiments all the time. We can often make good predictions, and then we have to
That's fair.
verify them.
Yeah. It's better
So
to know the rules and to have some areas of predictability.
that's correct. And then you need to have the ability to have quick feedback. This is why quick feedback is so important. So when you predict incorrectly, you don't get hurt by it. This is the essence of it. I didn't go into it enough, but this is where, I guess I need to say that explicitly. If you don't have that, then you run into, you have two extremes. In fact, it'd probably be good to make a diagram of this. On one hand, if you don't use inherent simplicity, you're doing a lot of extra work because you're not making any level of predictions. You're running experiments all the time. If you do inherent simplicity without any regards to that you might be wrong, then you run high risk because you will be wrong at times. So the idea is like driving in fog. As long as you don't go past your headlights, you can go as fast as you want. Now, the headlight restriction, because the fog kind of limits you. But a lot of people, see, if you say you're in a complex domain and I don't know anything and I've got to see everything after the fact, that's very limiting, and it takes away agency because you're powerless. So I'm saying, no, you have a lot of power and you have some risk. Now, I will say this. Most companies, and this, I hate to say it this way, but I don't know how else to say it this way. Most companies are doing so many things of very critical nature so wrong that I know if they fix that, it'll be an improvement. So that's another aspect I just realized, Thomas. I'm glad you said this. Because there is this too much lack of inherent simplicity, too much of inherent simplicity. There's curves, but there's also, well, what about the really big things? I know that a year plan is not going to be as good as a 1 month plan because there's no feedback. So that's the third dimension I'll pay attention to. Okay, any other burning questions? I don't mind going another couple of minutes if people have it. And please feel free. Tom, I'm so glad you asked that because it's inspired me. What I should do is people always, I do think that this is kind of an amazing offer. It's not going away. It's no time. This is how I'm doing things. But I do agree it could be interesting to take different personas like you mentioned yourself and say, well, here's where you can study it if you don't want to join this. And there are some good books, Kanban. So I'm sure you're aware of Corey Lattice's Scrumban book, which is good because, especially because, Scrumban is actually taking people from Scrum to Kanban. But I asked him once, I said, Corey, I find sometimes it's really good to use what you're doing to go away from Scrum to get to a Kanban based approach that has sprints and then stop there. And I don't know, I want to call that Scrumban because Scrumban is a transition model, but is it okay if I called that Scrumban? And he said, yes, that was years ago. That's where,
That's right. I think that's the new meaning of it. Even though the book is clearly a transition,
that's right.
Scrumban is now the hybrid.
Yeah, well, actually, the hybrids I see in Scrum are not Scrumban though, because they're still based on, they still don't have the laws of flow underneath it, which Kanban has. So the foundation is still missing. So anyway, it's some other stuff to do.
The meanings
Okay.
I usually get are Scrum, or excuse me, Kanban within a sprint.
Yeah, I know, but Kanban within a sprint is not the same thing as a Kanban model that's doing sprints, because a Kanban model that's doing sprints, to keep your work in process low throughout the sprint, which I guess maybe you do in both, but you know why, more of what's going on there. Okay. Feel free to send me an email if you have other questions. Otherwise, the next seminar, I'm doing one every other week that'll go through this. You can learn more about what we're doing in this by going to this Amplio. I used to call it Amplio University. Now I'm just calling them learning journeys. And you could also, if you go to the website, you go resources and presentations, you can see the other talk. I think the next one I'm doing on is jobs to be done. That would be a good thing for you to know because Scrum people, they're starting to get interested in this, but people don't know it well enough. That would be a reason to do the full program because you get the jobs to be done approach as well. We're starting that in a couple of weeks.
Can
Yeah.
I put in a request for a future one on how AI affects the process? Everybody wants to talk about AI now, and it changes both Scrum and Kanban.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a little bit because I use AI a lot. And I think that it's, in fact, we've had 2 or 3 sessions where I show a little bit of how I use AI. But I think AI is going to affect things a lot in the sense that just having knowledge in something is going to be less useful because AI can help you do that. So you need to be like Susan said, have agency. Anyway, uh, I'll send you a follow-up when this is ready. You could tell other people to view it. And in 2 weeks from today, but it's also at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I alternate between 8 and 2. I'll be doing a jobs to be done. I'm pretty sure that's my next one. So thanks for being here. See you later.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.